If a bill is sponsored by a Republican, that must mean it's a good bill, right? Unfortunately, that's not always the case, and today I'm going to break that down for you. Hey everybody, I'm Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of America and Conservative Ladies of Washington, and I guess this is kind of a bill of the day. I'm going to be talking to you about House Bill 1289. It's a Washington state bill that had a hearing this morning in the State House Education Committee. Now, this bill has a prime sponsor who is a Republican, and it is Republican Stephanie McClintock. She's from Southwest Washington, and I'm sure she's a very nice person. I've not met her myself. This bill, though, is one that she sponsored last year, and we opposed it last session as well. And a lot of people didn't understand, why didn't you support this? It's a Republican bill. It's a good Republican bill. Well, it's really not. And if we are conservatives and we have conservative values and principles, then we want to view every piece of legislation with that lens. And does this particular piece of policy align with our conservative principles? And so when we looked at this bill last year, and as we look at it again this year, that is the lens through which we're viewing this. What this bill does is it creates a survey for parents who are unenrolling their children from the government school system. And the reason for this survey is because parents have been unenrolling their kids in such high numbers since COVID, since 2020, and this survey would help the legislature understand why parents are doing that. Well, if you've been paying attention, if you have kids in government schools or had kids in government schools, it's really not a secret why parents are unenrolling their kids from public schools. When the classroom came into our living rooms and our kitchens and our homes in March of 2020, when all of the public schools and private schools, all the schools shut down, we got a firsthand look at what was going on in the classrooms of our children, and we didn't like it. It wasn't new. It was just that we were seeing a lot of this stuff firsthand for the very first time. And as a result of that curriculum that was being taught to students, a lot of parents said, we're not doing this. Another reason why parents left is because the schools were shut down for so long. They got their kids out, and their kids were actually doing better in private schools or in a homeschool situation. As I've been active in the state legislature in Washington now since 2022, and as I look around throughout the country, as we've expanded into a national organization, parents are very vocal about why they're pulling their kids out of government schools. It's not just a blue state issue. The government schools in many red states aren't that great either, and homeschooling is a better option because the education system is run by teachers' unions and special interest groups that are not providing our students with the curriculum and the tools and the skills that they need to be successful after they graduate from school. So there's really no secret. And the idea of putting forward a survey, spending the money, creating some kind of task force that would put out this survey, we just don't think that's necessary. We think that's a waste of time and a waste of money. And parents have been showing up in the legislature in Washington for the last 3 years as I've been active. I have seen so many parents come in and testify against the education policies. Well, why aren't you listening to them? If you truly care what parents say and why they're pulling their kids out, why aren't you listening to them and fixing the policies? And we all know the answer to that question. So the survey is optional, and it says it would be confidential. Well, it would be easy enough for the state to gather the data from your cookies or your browser information, and so they would be able to figure out who the people are that are submitting these surveys. It is a great way for them to gather data. As I was watching the hearing this morning, the chair of the Education Committee, Sharon Tomiko Santos, is also a sponsor. She's a co-sponsor of this bill. And she was talking about how great it would be if they could expand this survey, not just to families who are leaving the government school system, but also to the kids that are in the school system. And this would help them in creating educational equity and educational justice for all students, even those that are marginalized.
In keeping with your point of trying to improve the operations and the direction of school districts, that it that it might actually have greater information, to Representative Ortiz-Self's point in some ways, if we gather the information broadly rather than just from a subset. And your bill, as drafted, I think, would accommodate some amendment that would allow this to happen so that it would be all students. Would you be amenable to seeing an amendment like that?
So let me just make sure I understand. You would want to extend the survey to parents that are not leaving the public school system, but just everyone in general? Well, I'm open for discussion on that. The point of this was an exit survey, but I'm open to that and would like to hear more. How about that?
Yeah, I think so.
And of course, the teachers union showed up. And they testified in support of expanding this survey. This is something that we see all the time. The Republicans may come in with a well-meaning idea. I'm guessing, and I don't know, because Representative McClintock has not responded to my emails last session. And our education director reached out to her and asked her some questions last week, and she didn't respond to that email either. So I can't really, I'm just kind of assuming that maybe she created this piece of legislation in an attempt for the Republicans to have talking points about why they need to fix things in education. If that's the case, that's well intended, but our organization feels that the state doesn't need to be spending money on an answer that they already have. You have parents that are coming to testify, so use that as your data and as your talking points for some of this bad policy. And it's no secret that in a blue state where Republicans have a big disadvantage, they're in such a minority, getting your name on a bill that gets passed is a big deal. But we can't support bills just because it's a good Republican and we want to get the bill passed. We have to say, does it align with conservative policy? And this bill simply does not. And as with most bills in most legislation, not just in Washington, but every state around the country, and even at a federal level, each bill is a stepping stone for another bill. And what do we know about government? Does it stay small? Does it stay where, contained? No. They were already talking about how they can expand upon this piece of legislation. This would be inching their way in to collect data on students, on student families. They're already collecting enough data on students and their family. We don't need yet another survey that's run by the state, that's run through the Office of the Superintendent, the OSPI. We don't need that. You have to admit that considering Washington Democrats are taking away parents' rights in the education system. In fact, one of the bills in the hearing with this bill today was one that strikes parents' access to medical records, mental health records, and a lot of other critical pieces of their child's school records. So they want to cut parents out, and yet this bill is asking parents to give them information about why they're leaving the school system. That's rich to me. As a parent, I find that deeply offensive. And so that's the reason that we oppose this bill. It's not because we don't like the prime sponsor or that we're trying to give Republicans a hard time. We are conservative ladies of America, and our lens is conservative. Does this policy align with our conservative principles? And this particular policy does not. And we don't want the state gathering data on families, even if they say that it's optional. At what point does it become not optional? We know how that works in places like Washington. So anyway, I wanted to bring this to you today and just kind of share with you our thought process as we go through some of these bills, because a lot of people don't understand. It's never personal. It's purely about the policy, and does that policy align with our conservative principles? So thanks for listening. Please do share this video, especially with other parents, so that they can know about the education policies that are being proposed in Olympia this year. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.